I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh,
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Hey, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. What a beautiful audience. Yes, keep clapping. Welcome to the show. Thank you. I can see each and every one of you. You're so beautiful. Thank you again. Thank you. Keep clapping. Thank you so much. Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. What a blessing it is for you to join me, a mitzvah, to join me and my guest tonight, Wednesday the 28th. It is. Thank you again for joining. This is, as always, a Muddied Waters media production. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube, on SoundCloud. We're on Instagram. Slide in our DMs. I have nothing to do with our DMs. I'm not 100% certain what DMs are, but slide in there. We have a DM sliding person, so check us out there. Check us out on muddiedwatersoffreedom.com. Be sure to share this video so that you and your friends can be a part of the joy and merriment of this show. What else? Let's see what else is going on here. Oh, as always, thank you, Kroger, for the delicious drinking water, purified drinking water that I drink on this and many episodes, not every episode, but many episodes of My Fellow Americans. That is delicious Kroger water. The intro and outro music, as always, is brought to you by the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi. That's Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook and on Bandcamp. He's on SoundCloud too, but check him out on Bandcamp. Buy all of his music. Very, very talented guy, Mr. Joe Davi. This episode is also brought to you by the 2019 Libertarian Dad Bod Calendar, brought to you by the South Carolina Libertarian Party. I have a link to that in the show notes, so be sure to buy one of those so that you can support libertarianism and dad bods at the same time. How often do you get a chance to do that? I brought that chance to you, and you're welcome. And I'll be getting one as well, so be sure to check that out. As always, shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and them. Guys, I am super excited about my guest tonight. Unlike some of my other guests that, I mean, you know, whatever. If they come, that's fine. He's a trainer for the growing Army of Liberty. He is the director of content for the Americans for Prosperity Foundation's Grassroots Leadership Academy. His job is to travel the country teaching activists how to be effective advocates for liberty in their communities. He is also known as the man who successfully toppled a city government. We're definitely going to be talking about that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the destroyer of municipalities, Mr. Duane Lester. Duane, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
joining.
My pleasure. I think you may give me too much credit for Destroyer of Municipalities, but it is a title I will claim.
Well, we're going to talk more about that, and this show is all about claiming titles that don't necessarily belong to you. So we're keeping in that tradition. Guys, for those with any questions or thoughts, be sure to comment them either on our Facebook or YouTube videos, and Duane and I will let you know if you're right or wrong. So that's always good. Duane, you are a tireless advocate for freedom. It seems like every few days you're flying somewhere else to do your work. I presume that you get your fearlessness and tirelessness from being a father of 8. Am I correct in that?
That's very true, honestly. People ask me why you do what you do, and let's be honest. When I'm asked what is your why, and that's what we talk a lot about, is what's your why?
Right.
What is your why? And I say, I have 8 kids, and I never in my life ever want to hear one of my children or one of my grandchildren cry because they are hungry and I'm unable to do something about it.
Right.
Ever in my life do I ever want to have that experience. But because we live in America, one of the freest countries, one of the freest markets in the world that they've ever seen, we have an abundance of food. But that is threatened by central planning. And we see this in Venezuela, which was at one point a very rich country, and now they're starving. I don't want that. So
they were the breadbasket of Latin America at one point, right?
Yeah. Same with Zimbabwe.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. That is why, because I have 8 kids, and they are very, very important, and I never want to hear them cry in hunger.
Well, good. Yeah, and I definitely don't want that for you as well. Something I ask my guests whenever they come on is how they would describe their belief system. There's all these different labels out there. Whether you ascribe to a label or not, how you would define it, and how you would say you got to the beliefs that you have today. Was it sort of an aha moment, or sort of a natural evolution or progression at some point? Tell me about that.
Right. For a long time, I called myself a conservatarian. And then I would say I was more full-fledged libertarian.
Okay.
In fact, I love telling this story, if you don't mind. I was doing a training, and we were talking about libertarian principles, just principles of liberty. And I took what was considered a very extreme position just for the sake of the discussion. I said, well, what if this happened? And it was, government completely removed from a situation. Well, government completely removed from education. I said, what if tomorrow the governor came out and said, there's no more money for public education whatsoever. Right. We're shutting down all public funds. It's all going to be privately run. What would the other institutions of society do? And we had this conversation, and afterwards this member of the audience who was very vocal, we went back and forth for a while. She came up to me after the class and she said, you're the most libertarian person I've ever met. You're like 100% libertarian, and you're making me think.
Darn you.
I said, honey, you say the sweetest things. And we talked a while after that, but I would consider myself more libertarian than conservatarian or conservative anymore, because I tend to look at the situation and say, government shouldn't be doing that. It's that simple. Government has, a very explicit role. It is there to secure and defend rights. And if it's doing anything other than that, then it should not be doing that.
Right. So, and how would you say, so it sounds like there was sort of a progression from what you call conservatarianism to, I guess minarchism or something like that. Yeah. Would you say that it was sort of like it took you realizing that's what you always thought, or was it a series of events that sort of led to you to that, or what would you say?
Right. I'll walk you through that. It was September 11th, 2001. I went to school that morning. I was in college. Drove to school, sat in the back of this class. I was getting a degree in commercial horticulture. I sat in the back of this class on soils because I could rest my head on this table that was behind me because it was a class on dirt, you're going to fall asleep in this class. And I did. The director of the program came in after the class and said, I need to let you all know something. This morning, our country was attacked, and kind of explained what happened.
Right.
And I went through the rest of that morning in this state of confusion, because at that point in my life, I had not paid attention to politics whatsoever. I had no idea what was going on. I got home that afternoon, and my wife was there. We'd been married about a year, over a year and some change. And our 4-month-old daughter was on the floor. And I remember walking in and looking at my daughter laying there, and looking at my wife. And I looked at my wife and I said, it was a really scary day, wasn't it? And she just looked at me and said, yeah, it was. And I went to work that night, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I was working 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, going to college from 7 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, and then going home and watching my daughter from 3 in the afternoon until I went to work that night.
Right.
And I watched I slept when my daughter slept. But that night I got to work. We got there about 11. I turned on the radio to listen to the news because I wanted to know what was going on. On the radio came this guy named Michael Reagan. I didn't know Michael Reagan from Adam, who he was. I was just listening. And the more I listened, the more I sat there and said, I agree with that. And I agree with that. And about 2.5 hours into it, I said, am I what they call a conservative? I don't know. I had no idea. I couldn't tell you the difference between the left wing, the right wing, and a chicken wing.
Oh, wow.
But I wanted to learn. So I started picking up books anywhere I could find books and reading everything I can read. And I was blessed at that time to have a job where all I had to do was keep people from leaving the floor that I was on. I was working at a residential treatment facility, and all I had to do on the overnight was keep people from walking out of the door. And when you're 6'4" and you sit next to the door, it's a pretty easy job.
That takes care of itself. Right. Yeah,
it does. And so I had about 8 hours a night to read, and I read all the time. I didn't even know what to read at that time. I remember I was getting my political advice at that time from a guy named Mancal Muller. I don't know if you've ever listened to his radio show.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
So he had this guy on named Jim Mars, and he was interviewing Jim. He's like, read Jim's book. It's fantastic. And I said, I will. So I went to the library, and I picked up his book, and I'm reading it. And I'm like, yeah, the Rothschilds, right. And wait a second. Why are we talking about crystal alien skulls now? So at that point I didn't even know what to read, so I was like, okay, get rid of that. Other books. Eventually I got my degree in commercial horticulture, took a job, the next logical step, and became an armed nuclear security officer, which makes sense. There was a method to my madness.
Right. It's a form of horticulture. No? Yeah. But I found myself in another job where I basically had all day to read. And that's what I did. I read. In 2006, I made a goal of reading 100 books in a year. 100 books. Oh, wow. And in early December, I finished that goal and set another goal to never do anything that stupid again, because that is just a ridiculous amount of books. That's a lot of books, yeah.
Yeah. But best book I read that I remember was Larry Elder's 10 Things You Can't Say in America. And that's when I started recognizing that I had more libertarian beliefs than I did conservative beliefs. And so I started reading more and more, just anything I could get my hands on.
Right.
To the point where you've seen my Facebook page now, when I'm always bringing more and more books home.
Yeah.
I've got everything on my bookshelf from Howard Zinn to Thomas Sowell to, everything in between. Everything in between. I want to know. And I found myself more recently finding myself more libertarian than I was conservative. And I look back on what I used to advocate for when I was first getting into this, like in 2003, 2004, saying things like, well, look, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about.
You have nothing to worry about, right? Exactly, yeah.
So I look back on that and a little bit embarrassed at my ignorance and what that allowed me to do.
Right. That's funny. Yeah, it sounds similar to my evolution, I guess you could call it. 9/11 happened, instant neocon. We had to stop the terrorists and spread freedom. so that they'd love us and see, you know, how wonderful they were. When Ron Paul came on the scene in '08 doing his whole thing, I was like, this guy's an idiot. He hates America. He has no idea what he's talking about. He wants the terrorists to win. And then watching the next few years of events, I'm like, yeah, he was right. And that really kind of pushed me, that realization. And then like, sort of like with you reading more and more, I found I was reading more and more libertarian stuff. And in the last 2 years, or last, I guess maybe 3 or 4 years, reading like more and more like hardcore libertarian, Lysander Spooner type stuff has really, I find myself more like, I'm pretty much I think I'm as far over as I can get at this point, because you know, I'm an anarchist, but if there is further to go, then I'll probably reach that in the next few months. Now you actually had a prolific history as a blogger. I think you describe yourself as a recovering blogger.
I've called myself that.
Yeah, you would
blogger, a podcaster, vlogger. I've if you can do it on the social webs, if you can do it on the internet, I've tried to do it, I think.
Yeah, you were the first Breitbart Blogger Award recipient, or the recipient of the first ever Breitbart Blogger Award in 2012. You founded the Missouri Torch. What got you into that? And I guess also what got you out of that? Because I'm doing podcasting now, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm about to hit something that makes me not want to do it anymore.
No, what got me into that was it was after I was actually working at the nuke plant at that time. It was around 2006, 2007. Of course, I had read like 6 books, so I knew everything there was to know about politics.
Right.
So I started saying, you know, other people out there deserve to hear my wisdom. And so I started writing on this website called Newsvine. My friend Andrew Riley introduced me to this website called Newsvine.
Okay.
Newsvine, when it started, was actually a really good site because they had rules for their comment sections, and they enforced them. So there were no personal attacks allowed. You had to actually make rational, lucid arguments. You couldn't be the typical internet YouTube comment section. And so what I found, but it was also very left of center. Okay. There was at that point a conservative population there, but by and large it was left of center. And I found that the more I wrote there, the better I got, because I was not allowed to just say, hey, here's an unfounded conservative opinion you should all appreciate. They would start destroying it.
Right.
And I actually had to learn to back my opinions up. I couldn't just state a premise. I had to state a premise and then back my premise up. So I got to thank my leftist friends online for making me a better writer and a better blogger. But I was writing so much on Newsvine that my friend Andrew said, you should just start your own website. It's really not that hard. We could do it together. He said, you could write content and I could be the tech. Because he's very good at coding. I mean, this guy, when he puts together a website, he's fantastic at it. He told me one time, I said, well, can we do that? He says, it's not can we, it's, you know, why don't we?
Right. And
he could code to do it. So we started a website in 2007 called All American Blogger. That went until 2014. But in 2012, actually, that's when the Franklin Center and the Heritage Foundation gave me their first Breitbart Blogger Award. Right. And that's a different story that I'm not going to get into. But it was an unexpected honor. And at that time, that was right after Breitbart had just died.
Oh, and, wow. Okay.
So that was the very first one. So that was a great honor. 2014, I started looking around the state of Missouri, realized there was no one writing about Missouri state politics. And so I started the Missouri Torch. Did that for a few years, and then actually decided to start doing it for money. One thing everybody would always say to me, how do you make money blogging? You know, you introduce yourself. Yeah, I'm a blogger. Well, how do you make money blogging? Right. I say, when I figure that out, you know, because it's tough. But I
like the underpants gnome, you know, blog ? Profit, right?
Right, exactly. Yep. That is exactly. Yeah, we can do this. Everybody's doing it. It's got to be.
Right.
No. So I went from doing the Missouri Torch to working for a couple of different outfits, making money where I could, and then as I was writing, I took the opportunity to go out to Colorado and go through the leadership program of the Rockies. Fantastic, fantastic 9-month program. As broke as we were at that time, I was still finding a way to get from Tarkio, Missouri to Denver, Colorado once a month for this program. After that program, I actually went to a GLA class in Kansas City. And as I'm sitting there, I thought I could maybe do this. And I applied right there in the class. Interviewed later, did not get the job. Kept at it. They opened it up again, applied again, got the job, and walked away from the social media blogging world.
Very good stuff.
So it wasn't a matter of saying, "Oh, I can't. This is horrible." It was a matter of saying it's time to move on to the next stage.
Move on to the next step. Now, I leaned on it heavily in your intro, and if you can't tell, I'm really excited to talk about it. Before we get into Grassroots Leadership Academy or really anything else, I would like to talk about your role in upending and destroying the Leviathan that was the Quitman, Missouri City Council. Talk to me about how that came about, and don't shy away from hyperbole, because I'm definitely not going to.
Okay. So I lived in a town called Quitman, Missouri. It had, at its height while we lived there, maybe 40 people. Maybe. 8 of them lived in my house.
So wait, so that was 40 people, including your household?
Yeah. That's, 40 people, 8 of them in my house. And we had a city council of 6. So there's 6 people in a town of 40 that are making all the decisions. So, you can do the math. That's 1 for every 6. At the time I got on there, I think there were about 30 people there, because some of them had moved, some of them had died. So the town was dwindling down.
Right.
One of my neighbors comes over to me and says, introduces himself, because I did not introduce myself to my neighbors. I was quite happy being on the edge of town, away from the closest building to our property was the Mennonite church, and I was good with that.
Right.
They introduced themselves, explained that they needed someone to run for the city council because there were some people on the city council that were getting in everybody's business, and they were trying to they were just bossing people around. And man, you could not have hit my trigger harder.
Right.
Yeah, we have the precedent in this town of 30 people. We need you to stop it. And of course I put on my cape.
The tyranny of the city council. Right.
Right. And so I put my name in, and I'm happy to say that in my first election, I got the vote of every registered voter who could have voted for me.
The Saddam Hussein election.
All 15 people in that town who were registered to vote voted for me.
Nice.
So we went in, and I show up the first meeting, and I see what's going on. And there's one of the people on the city council says, we've got to start finding these people in this town who are letting their dogs run loose. I thought, I moved to this town so I could let my dog run loose.
Right.
We've got 5 acres of land. There's nobody around me.
Right.
So I just looked at her and I said, well, can you show me in our city ordinances where we can do that? And she says, well, it's right in there. I said, okay, show me. We're in City Hall at this time.
Right.
Well, I said, well, fine, show me. Well, we don't have the city ordinances right here.
In City Hall.
We're in City Hall. Where are they? Well, they're not here. I said, if we have the power to do that, then let's talk about that. But you have to show me in the ordinances where we actually have the power to do that.
Right.
And she says, well, it's in the state books too. We can do that. I said, well, show me. So she pulls this book out and she throws the book on the table and says, it's right there. I look at the book and say, this says that we can charge people $1 for a license. It says nothing about fining people for letting their dogs run.
Right.
So that was my introduction to the city council. It was downhill from there.
Yeah.
It was we had another election not long after. It was maybe a year after that, I think. Two of the people who were the biggest troublemakers on the city council. One was voted off.
Okay.
There were two new people coming on. And I went to the city council meeting after that. This person who was my, biggest thorn in the side, she was voted off, and she says, she was the treasurer. She says, here's the balance of the city's bank accounts. I went ahead and closed their bank accounts. Why'd you do that? Well, we have to do that. So hands me these checks for tens of thousands of dollars. And the person sitting next to her, who was best friends with her, says, well, I'm resigning. I said, okay, you're out and you quit. They said, yes. And then they turned to the two new people coming on the board, and they said, by the way, you two are ineligible to be on the board because you haven't paid your city taxes. So I turn over here and I look and I say, so you two are off. You two can't be on. You two are out. And I look across the table at the only other person left on this board, and she looks at me. She was in her 70s at that time. She looks at me and she says, Duane, if I have to do anything, I quit. I said, okay, meeting's over. Let's everyone go home, get out of City Hall.
So you at that point were the sole member of the city council then?
Yeah, I looked at him. I said, so basically what you're saying is I'm chair, I'm treasurer, I'm clerk, I'm mayor, I'm grand poobah of this entire town. And they said, yes. I said, okay, meeting's adjourned, time to go home.
And I second it too.
Yeah, and I close that. Next meeting we have, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, they show up again. Again, it's just me and this other person, and they show up again. The lady who was the treasurer starts demanding to see where the budget is. I say, what are you talking about? She says, well, you were supposed to have a budget done last week, so where's your budget? I said, you were the treasurer up until last week. Why don't we have a budget? She said, that's not my job now, but the state ordinance, state statutes say you're supposed to have a budget. Where's it at?
Right.
So it was that contentious the whole time.
Okay.
Until finally, I went to our county commission, had a hearing. What's funny about that is I showed up and they actually closed the hearing down because somebody showed up. I sat down and they all looked at each other and they said, we need to go into recess. And they came over and said, what do you need? What are you doing here? And they were just stunned that somebody showed up, I think, to the county commission hearing. And I said, I need somebody to come out to Quitman and explain to these folks what's going to happen if we disincorporate the town, if we just do away with the government completely.
Right.
And they said, well, we can come out and do that. When's the next meeting? Told them when the next meeting was. I went to every house in town, knocked on doors, told them there was a meeting coming up, told them that the county commissioner was going to be there, told them what the purpose of the meeting was, to talk about doing away with the city government. So the day comes, the city hall's filled. Everybody in town's there.
All 30 people.
All 30 people. And so we start getting into this, and we go for about an hour with the county commissioner explaining what's going to happen. If the town disincorporates, then all the city roads in town will be turned over to the county. Now, all the roads in town are already gravel. There wasn't a paved road in this entire town.
Okay.
And so basically what that means is the county's going to gravel all the roads. The county's going to maintain all the roads. We didn't even have a city road department anyway.
Right.
So that was, people just learning that nothing's really going to change except the county's going to be doing everything.
Right.
And
right.
I remember one of them said, well, what about street lights? And the county commissioner said, well, you'll have the opportunity to pay for a safety light on your property if you want. And I said, I pay for a safety light. I'll pay for the street light and the safety light.
Right.
And he said, well, I don't want to have to pay for my own light. And I said, who do you think's paying for it now?
Right.
You're paying for it now. It's just coming out of taxes where you're paying for it. So there was bickering. People didn't want to give the government. I remember one of them looked at me and said, why do you want to get rid of this board anyway? And I said, because I don't want to have to deal with this board anymore.
Right.
they looked at me like I was crazy. They said, well, you don't have to stay on the board if you don't like it, Lester. And I said, you're not hearing me. Whether I'm on the board or off the board, I'll still have to deal with this board.
Right.
And there's not a person in this room who has any business having any authority over anyone else in this room, because none of us know what we're doing. And they looked at me like I had just called them the worst name in the book. Just,
right.
I cannot believe you said that.
Right.
And I said, tell you what, let's adjourn. Let's let the county commissioner go, and then we can talk about this some more. So the county commissioner goes outside. It's hot in there. Everybody starts going outside. This older woman who was on the board with me, the one who looked at me and said, if I have to do anything, I quit.
Right.
She was angry with one of the people who used to be on the board, and they went outside. This older lady stands up, and she's got a metal cane at that time. You know, the kind of metal cane that comes down. It's got 4 legs on the bottom.
Yeah.
She is hustling. I mean, she is moving for the door. And I said, where are you going? And she turns and looks at me and she goes, I'm going to go out there and effing kill her. I said, you're going to go to jail. And she said, I don't care. And I said, meeting's adjourned. Everybody go home. And that was the last meeting that I held in that town. And about 8 months later, somebody knocked on my door with a petition to do away with the city government, which I signed. And there's no government in that town anymore.
I tried looking up to prepare, like, to research this a bit more. There's no information on Quitman except a Wikipedia article that says that it's a small, formerly incorporated, unincorporated part of I forget the county in Missouri, and right, and then there was an article from 2014. From a few years ago, from when it saying that it was, that it had been, deincorporated, and right. That article was so viral that apparently there's a 404 error if you try to go to it now. So, so the history, you not only wiped out the city, you wiped out any history of the city, and or you were a part of that. I when you first told me about this, I thought it was hilarious. Where I live, we have 72 owners and an HOA, and I think that's ridiculous. That 72 owners in an HOA. Why do we need one with that few? 30 people with a city council of 6. I think that's hilarious. But the thing is, we talk a lot about the federal government and the oppression and tyranny that comes from the federal government and the mismanagement and all of that stuff. And then some of us will talk about it, the state level things that are happening. And those are all valid things. But so much of the tyranny that happens on a day-to-day basis is at the municipal level. It's at the city and county level. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have some folks with just a little bit of power and they just go nuts with it. Right, yeah. And there's absolutely there's almost no governor on that. I've been renovating this house that I live in for what seems like forever, because we refuse to go into debt to renovate this house. So whenever we get a little bit of money, we do what we can with it. And right. As we're renovating, believe it or not, when you do demolition in a house, there's rubble, which tends to pile up at times. Right. And so there was stuff in our yard occasionally. For 2 years straight. And we'd have this person who would walk past our house, and they were on the city council. And I remember I had the chief of police call me one day and say, Duane, can you come down to City Hall? I need to talk to you. Right. And I said, that is never good. So I went down there, and they explained to me that they needed to give me a letter to show that to deliver a letter from the city council saying I needed to clean up my yard. And that angered me because my first thought is, who complained about it? Not one of my neighbors has complained about this. Right. What role? Why does the government have a role in using force to tell me to clean up my yard? That's not at all the proper role of government. Right. And so they turned the super libertarian man at that point. And so I showed up to the city council meeting, and they
asked if there was anybody who wanted to make a comment. And so I stood up at that point and gave this big, long speech explaining how I mean, in this speech, I noted Bastia. I quoted the law. This is another town of 1,500 people. And I'm there going, furthermore, French economist Frederick Bastiat wrote in the law. And they're like, who, what? But what was funny before that, as I was walking, because City Hall is only a few blocks from my house, as I'm walking towards City Hall,
Right.
the mayor is standing outside. I worked with the mayor at the nuke plant. We were friends. And he stood there and he's laughing. He goes, I've been waiting for you to show up. And so I went off on this rant, and I remember closing my speech by saying, and in the unlikely time, on the unlikely day that I actually violate my neighbor's rights, until that day, leave me alone. And so we haven't had too much problem with the city council after that. That person was voted off and then later voted back on. But what I also learned was that person also was in violation of city ordinances because their house needed painted. And again, I was like, I don't even care if your house needs painted.
Right.
It's hypocritical. But you're right. It is those small tyrannies that people take for granted. They just assume that's the way it is. Of course you mow your yard. You know, I mean, what if government didn't tell you to mow your yard? Nobody'd mow their yards.
No one would mow their yard. Everyone's house would be filled with debris. And again, just for those who may have just tuned in, your house is on 5 acres. So this isn't like, your rubble is going to, go into your neighbor's, into your neighbor's yard or something like that. You are well past anything touching anyone else.
Well, this is actually in a different town. We moved to a different town, but again, not one of my neighbors complained.
Right.
Not one. I said, whose rights am I violating? Who has complained? I said, I've had more people from the city show up to complain about stuff than I have people from the entire town welcome me to this town. That's a problem. We talk about the fact that community is just not what it used to be anymore. Well, that's because government's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
When government was limited, community could thrive. But now we don't recognize these nanny state laws. Everybody thinks about nanny state laws as being something like Michael Bloomberg in New York telling you can't get a large cut. But a nanny state law is a city ordinance that tells you how high your grass can be. Because that's somebody saying, I don't want to have to go talk to my neighbor. I want a letter from the city council. I want guns pointed at this person telling them they have to mow their lawn because I'm uncomfortable talking to my neighbor.
Right.
That's
I want to use violence by proxy over things that aren't really that big of a deal rather than just go over to my neighbor and talk to them about it.
Mm-hmm.
So well, good. So, you've, one municipality down, however many thousands to go. But, so now you're
just go across the state of Missouri like a wave of municipality destroying locusts.
Yeah, exactly. Every city you land in, they go, oh, here he comes. We're next. So now you're the director of content for the Grassroots Leadership Academy, which is part of the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. Talk to me about what they do, and I guess more what you do as part of a member of the GLA.
Well, GLA is, like you said, part of Americans for Prosperity Foundation. We're active in 36 different states, and we host all kinds of trainings focusing on everything from understanding the importance of key institutions in society, understanding that what government's role is, and how other key institutions such as education or business or community, the roles they should play in their proper role, and how they're being inhibited from exercising those because government has grown to the point where those institutions have atrophied. We talk about that. We teach people how to actually organize in their communities, how to start making a change. We teach people the power of economic freedom, what freedom looks like, how to be a better advocate for it, how to recognize when you see external barriers that are keeping people from reaching their full potential, how to recognize them, but not only that, but how to address them and how to break through them. how to address internal barriers that keep people from reaching their full potential. For example, there's a common internal barrier that I see on every side. That this idea that if government doesn't do it, it won't be done.
Right.
And again, that's something that Bastiat talked about too. Bastiat talked about the socialist. He said the socialist thinks if we don't want government to do it, then we don't want it done.
Then we don't want it
or we
done,
think
right.
it shouldn't be done at all.
Yep.
That's not what the belief is. The belief is government has a role, and these other key institutions can pick up the slack. And de Tocqueville talked about that when he talked about the fact that where you'd see a French ruler or English lord doing things, you see Americans forming associations. That's how things used to get done.
Right.
We talked a lot about that, but mainly the short version is when I'm at church, people say, "What do you do?" I say, I get to go all over the country and make friends and teach them to fight for freedom, whatever that looks like.
Very good. Very good. So you travel the country, and I enjoy watching your updates on where you're traveling to. And so you travel the country, and basically there are people that have signed up for these, I guess, workshops, classes. I'm not sure what they'd be called. And then, for different types of certification. And then you're going and kind of walking them through that. And, what is your typical role in doing that kind of stuff?
Well, there are different kinds of presentations we give. We have what are called certifications, which are 6-week courses. We have 3 different levels of certifications where we learn the very basics of grassroots organizing, from recognizing the key institutions to how to take leadership roles, how to organize people, how to take people from being in a network to actually forming communities that can create change. And then we have what are called insight to actions, which are more standalone presentations, which might be something like, one of the more recent ones I've given is one called American Trade, Fantasy Island, or Treasure Island.
Right.
And just trying to understand how trade brings prosperity to countries. So these insight to actions are standalone on a specific topic that we can come in one evening, give this training, introduce people to Grassroots Leadership Academy, what we do, and help them understand different topics or skills that can promote freedom in their area.
Cool.
So my role would be I come in, I work with the field director there to see what their needs are for that evening. The activists show up. I will train the activists in whatever, answer their questions, work with them as late into the night as they want to stay, and then go to the hotel and do it all again the next day.
That's cool. And you're in Tampa right now, right?
Right now we're in Tampa. We're actually revising our level 2 curriculum for next year.
Cool. Yeah. So you're actually close to our, I guess, flagship studio for Muddied Waters Media is in St. Petersburg. So that's
all right.
Yeah. So who are typically the kind, because I was trying to figure that out. Who are typically the kinds of people who sign up to go through your different curriculums, and what are the kinds? So like, what would you say is the most commonly cited goals that they have in going into them?
We have a very diverse group of people who come to our trainings, and some people show up because they have a problem in their neighborhood or their community. Right. They want to learn the skills to do something. They're tired. One of the most common things I hear is, "I'm tired of yelling at the television. I want to do something." Right. So these folks, they will show up. They'll learn, and a lot of them apply. I've gone out and applied what we've done. There are people. I think we've had 11. I think it was 11 graduates of our program in New Hampshire are now in state legislature.
Oh wow.
Which is not much for New Hampshire. I mean, that there's 435 people in their state legislature. I think if you're like the 9th caller, you get in the state legislature in New Hampshire. So
it's like a slightly larger version of Quitman.
It's absurd in New Hampshire. They have literally 435 people in that small state. It's the largest state government, I believe, in the country. But people have gone through our program and used the skills we've taught to defeat income tax levies. I believe in Steubenville they helped defeat an income tax. That was something those folks organized on their own. We've seen people take action all across the country using what we've taught to promote freedom and lessen the growth of government.
That's awesome. Do you have, so people that, are there, I'm trying to picture, are there people that they sign up for your curriculum because you're giving sort of in many cases, a more broad-based idea of freedom and how it works. And I would imagine you get people that, they sign up for the curriculum because there are specific things they want to fight. And then they get in and, for example, they hear, about American trade and maybe they don't quite agree with that. Do you get a lot of people that they come in for one reason and end up kind of bucking against what the curriculum is, or?
I won't say no. There are people who come in and they disagree with what we teach, and that's fine. Right. I'm not going to say everybody has to think the same thing. That's not what we're at. We're not out to create a hive mind by any means.
Right.
But there are people who occasionally will show up and maybe they're not there to learn. I don't know. I'm not going to assume their motivations, but yeah, I mean, it's just like any audience. We see everybody who gets hecklers or people like that. It's fine.
Right. So are they actually, I mean, you get like actual hecklers or just people that you could tell are maybe not feeling the curriculum?
I've seen some folks who've come in a recent, it was interesting because we had some folks who were more supporters of a protectionist trade policy in the same room with people who were members of a very libertarian organization. And so it was interesting at times to just sit back and watch the conversation between those two groups. Because what I find interesting about that, and I actually appreciate that, there's a guy named Dan Bongino. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. I've met Dan a couple of times, and it was at a Freedom Works event. He was telling a story about how he used to, when he'd campaign, he would talk to people on street corners. And he said that he would engage with people who were wildly opposed to him and his position.
Right.
And he said we would get into these they would get loud, and I would just be articulating my position as calmly and as rationally as I could. He said, I knew that I would never get through to them. I knew that I would never be able to change their mind. But there were people in the crowd who were watching.
Right.
Who we could influence. And it goes almost back to my leftist friends online who helped me improve as a writer, because that gives me the opportunity to hear the oppositions to our principles and to our positions and our policies, and be able to articulate rationally and calmly our principles in a way that people can hear and appreciate.
Right. Yeah. And now that you're sort of a full-fledged libertarian, you can get it equally on the conservative side as well, or if not equally, then quite a bit.
Yeah. I am an equal opportunity target of abuse. Yes.
Yeah. I find, so when I will post stuff or when I do these videos or whatever else, and I talk about things, I like when I hit the sweet spot where both sides are mad at me at the exact, about this, it's one thing if I have one opinion that, the left gets mad at, and another opinion that the right gets mad at. But I like when I have an opinion that both sides are equally angry at me for having.
Not from a deal perspective, but in my personal capacity, I'm sure you've seen my Facebook posts.
Yes.
Where I'll simply pose a question.
Yes.
And then somewhere in the thread, I will be called both a statist and an anarchist.
Yes. Yeah. A Nazi and a communist at the same time.
Right.
That's awesome. So I will assume that you get a lot of the, quote unquote MAGA hat people. They come in, maybe they support, fighting against a tax or a regulation or something like that, but they're not, they're not going to support, at least not for now. They're not supporting they don't come in supporting, for example, free trade or necessarily prison reform. Although Trump now supports prison reform, so I guess they do as well. But there are certain aspects where they're much more protectionist when it comes to immigration and trade and things like that. When you're dealing with people like that, how much time would you say you spend trying to show them how their opposition to government in this sphere can also be applied to this sphere, and how much do you just kind of meet them where they are and say, okay, well, we agree on this, and we can just move forward and fight together, fight as a unit together with that, and as opposed to arguing this out?
No, it's a great question. Occasionally, you will get some folks in there who, especially in the free trade trainings that I've given, that are adamantly opposed to our belief that free trade does the most good for the most people.
Right.
What I found is it's important to talk to those people. The way to do that, what I found most effective, and a great story. I was in Alaska, training in Alaska. We were talking about storytelling, and I asked the question to the class. I said, "Why do we tell stories? Why are stories important?" And this guy in the back of the room, wearing a libertarian shirt from a local libertarian organization, said, "It's because we buy with emotion and we justify with logic." And I sat back and I thought, that's brilliant. Say that again.
That is brilliant. Yeah.
And he said, "It's because we buy with emotion and we justify with logic."
Right.
And I said, "That's exactly right."
That's brilliant.
That's exactly right. We buy with emotion. And so when you are in a situation where you're dealing with someone who may not agree with your positions, very often folks who are generally considered center right, so conservatives and libertarians considered center right, we will tend to go with facts and logic.
Right.
That's kind of our go-to. Well, according to historical trade statistics, what we've seen, then
the philosophy of trade and everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. People tune out at that point.
Right.
If you turn to someone and something that I've done, I've had, this is just in personal conversations. You've probably heard this too. People saying, "Well, this is a short-term pain for a long-term gain. This is just a bargaining chip. This is
bargaining
a
chip,
bargaining strategy."
Right.
And I said, "Tell that," I forget his name. We'll just say Joe Smith. I said, "Tell that to Joe Smith, who's working at a nail factory in southeast Missouri." Joe's been working at this nail factory, and he's got a 5-year-old daughter. His 5-year-old daughter has a congenital heart defect. This is something she was born with. She was born with this heart defect. Joe gets his health care insurance through the factory that is now on death's door, near extinction, because of tariffs.
Right.
Why should Joe's 5-year-old daughter be the one to suffer the pain so that there can be long-term gain from some steel executive somewhere?
Right, exactly.
How is that fair? How is that moral? How is that just?
Right.
So if you can, and that's a true story. I'm not making that story up. That was in the paper. I read that. And when I read that, I thought, tell me again about how this is unfair. Tell me again about how this trade is unfair. How is it fair to put Joe in that position where he has to worry about the life of his 5-year-old daughter because somebody somewhere thinks that steel factories need to be making things more inefficiently in America than they can somewhere else?
Right. And putting aside, again, we always go, libertarians, the guest from my last episode, Robin Kerner's, he does messaging for the Libertarian Party, and something he says that libertarians are unique in that we systemize things. So we tend not to look at things from a care versus harm perspective. We look at things from a systemic freedom versus tyranny perspective. And so we tend to, anything we look at, we tend to systemize it, as opposed to most people who look at it the way you just said it. What do you say to, what about this example? What do we say to that person? And so you can reach them with that. We're able to look at trade and see things, for example, like there is no such thing as unfair trade. If there was, every trade involves two things being traded. So if I'm trading with a Chinese company, I have traded my money for the thing that they're giving me. We've both decided that we want the other one's thing more than the other. But like you said, explaining that to someone who's looking at it from the emotional standpoint of, well, the steel companies are losing jobs because of, you know, cheap Chinese steel or whatever, it's hard to do that. So you had given another example, and I'm trying. Go ahead.
If I could jump in for 1 second.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Once you talk about, once you get that emotion, once you open that door with emotion, because again, we buy with emotion, we justify with logic.
Right.
I was having a conversation with my brother recently. We were talking about steel tariffs, and I was making the case that protectionism, closed systems, hurt people, and openness is a much more preferable system. And the question, he made the point, well, I'm concerned about our national security. What happens when we go to war with China and we don't have the steel we need to make our ships and our tanks? And I said, my friend, 80% of market demand for steel in America is met by American steel manufacturing. 80% of market demand is met by American steel manufacturing. And there's no one, I think, who's more of an expert on what the military needs right now than, let's say, Secretary of Defense Mattis.
Right.
Do you believe he knows what the military needs? Yeah, absolutely, he does. He says American steel manufacturers produce 30 times more steel than the military needs. There's absolutely no reason for us to put tariffs in place for national security reasons. Right. And he said, I had no idea. I did not know that. Right. And we were able to walk away with that on more agreement. Right. But to start with those statistics, you're not going to get anywhere. But because that's the point where you can justify with logic. People buy with emotion, then they can justify with logic. You start with the story. You start with the emotional hook. Then you can come in with facts and logic after that. Right. Because
if you start with the logic, they say, tell that to such and such who lost their steel job, and you've lost them. So putting aside the fact, because I've heard that before, not just with steel, but just in general, like the pending war that's going to happen any moment with China, because it's very common that the two largest mutual trading partners go to a war so that they can both end up destitute and lose millions of people on both sides. That's definitely going to happen any minute now.
Yeah, and it's not. Let's assume that we'll go to war with China. Right. But let's just say that's going to happen. Right. Because I've had people bring that up too, and I say, at what point do you think what's going to happen? You look at who America trades with. Our biggest trade partners are Canada, Mexico. Right. We have Great Britain, France. We have all these, trade partners that aren't China. What's going to explain the scenario to me where we're at war and nobody in the entire world will sell us steel? Right. What does that scenario even look like, and how do we get there?
Right. That no one will sell it to us.
Right. It's not logical. Of course. And it's a matter of getting people to the point where you can open their ears to that. But you can't open someone's ears by coming right out of the gate with facts and logic. That's just not how it works. We buy with emotion. We justify with logic.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of viewer comments I want to go to. Fotini Henderson said she gets what you were saying. You know, her kids and her grandkids are her why. And so she gets what you're saying there. And then we have a shout out. Steubenville, Ohio shout out, home of Dean Martin and Jimmy the Greek. Is that anywhere near you?
No, but I've been to Steubenville, Ohio quite a few times. I like that area.
Okay, shout out to Steubenville.
Being in Steubenville was how I got to West Virginia the first time, because I took a wrong turn and said, what am I doing in West Virginia? Then I had to cross that bridge again and get back to Steubenville.
I actually have the opposite story. I've been in Ohio twice, both times accidentally. In Pennsylvania, I was supposed to be in Pennsylvania, headed to Toronto, and took the wrong turn and ended up in, I think, Youngstown. So good stories related to Ohio and so forth. So, Duane, you've traveled around the U.S. helping to grow a grassroots army network of activists who fight for a more, fair, more free and open society.
We call it a society of mutual benefit.
Society of mutual benefit. What would you say are the greatest challenges that are facing those of us who are fighting for that? And then what would you also say that is, let's say, the single greatest thing that any one of us can do to fight for that, besides signing up for the Grassroots Leadership Academy, of course?
Good start. Yeah, I would start there. But that's a great question. What is the biggest hurdle? Talking about that with some friends today.
Okay.
I honestly think it's tribalism. Tribalism and confirmation bias. We've seen in the past 2 years, how many of us have seen people that we thought were staunch, small government, free market, liberty thinkers,
right,
become the total opposite of that and are now justifying things that you couldn't imagine them justifying before.
Yep.
All because of the tribe that they're a part of.
Yep.
Tribalism is such a dangerous thing that it will turn people into promoters of ideas that they used to condemn.
Right.
And I think that is one of the most dangerous things we're facing today. And it goes hand in hand with confirmation bias. This idea that I cannot trust that source because they're fake news.
Right.
I have people all the time. I'm telling people that is a logical fallacy.
Yep.
The source is not important. The facts are important. Even the Inquirer gets stories right now and then.
Yep.
I am
We
willing
know that
to make
now. Yeah.
exceptions occasionally for Alex Jones.
He was right about the frogs. The thing that people mock him about the most, the man was right. Now they don't turn the frogs gay, but they turn them, I guess, transgender. They cause the frogs. I'm not going to go down this wormhole because I could spend 20 minutes on it. But there is something that they, quote unquote, because he said they put things in the water that make the frickin' frogs gay. The structure of that sentence, they are putting things, it's a byproduct of an antidepressant or something like that. So in the water, so that they are putting things in the water that have been shown to speed up or accelerate or cause a process where frogs go from one biological sex to the other, and which makes them, because they all go to that one sex, they turn them into females. They're then unable to reproduce, and then they die. So gay, no. But they do turn the frickin' frogs transgender or transsexual, and we mock him mercilessly about that at our peril. R.I.P. the frogs. Go ahead. So that's.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's that. Thank you again for tuning in. So yeah, yeah, and especially in the era now of video. Okay, great. The video came from CNN or it came from Bloomberg, or on the other side it came from Fox or from Red State or whatever. It's video or it's audio. You can see or hear the person saying the thing that's being asserted. You can see the thing being done that's being asserted. Like you said, the confirmation bias or the reverse confirmation bias, where it's like, well, it came from that, I can't believe it, and it didn't come from my tribe. I agree with you. That's a major issue. So what would you say, I guess, again, short of signing up for the Grassroots Leadership Academy, is like the single biggest thing someone can do to fight for that society of mutual benefit?
You know, one thing that I am adamant that you need to do is understand your principles. If you can understand the principles that have built prosperous free societies throughout history, if you can understand those, then you can discuss intelligently, logically about almost any topic.
Right.
That was one thing that I learned in the leadership program of the Rockies. We had these things called speak outs that we would do, where after lunch, the one of the leaders of the leadership program would pick people in the class. You would have to explain a position or answer a question.
Right.
And you would have to do it by identifying the principles. And I remember the first day we did this in my class, they warned us the week before it was going to start the month before it was going to start next month. We just finished lunch. I really had to go to the bathroom. Really had to go to the bathroom.
Right.
Lunch is ending. I stand up, start to go to the bathroom. They say, "Oh, no, you don't." Duane, stop. I turned around. They were starting speak out and had the impression that I was trying to escape. Really just had to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And and they said, you need to tell us, should the United States government fund the CDC? I'd never even considered that, never even thought about that.
Right.
But the way they had to structure our answers to that was by first stating, what is this a question of? So I had to say, this is a question of the role of government. Our principle, then we had to think, what is the proper role of government?
Right.
This is a question of the role of government. The proper role of government is to secure and defend our rights. And then again, I go to this guy a lot, but I went to Bastiat and I said, Bastiat says that a legitimate, just government can only take action that we as individuals can take. We can only use force to secure or defend our own rights. Therefore, government should only be able to use force to secure and defend our own rights. Therefore, government should not be able to take the property of one person to fund an organization that studies germs when the free market can do that itself. So no, the government should not fund the CDC. And they said, you can have a seat. And I said, I'm going to the bathroom. That's what I need to do.
I'm going to have a seat in the bathroom. Yeah.
But you really need to understand your principles.
Right.
I would think a very close second to understanding the principles of a prosperous, free society. Second to that is learn how to tell a story. You've got to learn how to tell a story. I can't emphasize that enough, because we buy with emotion and we justify with logic. We keep seeing people come at these Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner debates with facts and logic, and then you get what you said earlier. Tell that to the person who's sleeping in their car tonight.
Right.
You've got to learn to tell a story.
Okay, very good. Good stuff. So thank you again for joining me. I'm going to give you a chance now to give me any final thoughts you have, anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover. Plug anything you want to plug for Grassroots Leadership Academy, any upcoming events, anything, any new certifications, anything you want to talk about. The floor is yours.
We've got certifications coming up. I mean, we've got all over the country, 36 different states. Check your, you can go to, I think it's grassrootsleadershipacademy.org.
Yep.
There's an upcoming events section there. You can look at that. But one thing I want to emphasize, one thing that I learned through my own just activism is you can make a difference. That is one of the biggest cop-outs you will hear. Well, I can't make a difference anyway. They're all crooks. Political power comes from two sources: people and money. And you can get people involved. You can do this. And the more you can drill down, the more local you can get, the more powerful you get. I remember writing for All American Blogger. I wrote an in-depth 5-part week-long series on illegal immigration that had absolutely no impact on the debate at all.
Right.
None. I wrote an article about a state senator in Missouri, and that state senator called me that afternoon.
Oh, wow.
So you can make a difference, because the fact of the matter is most people aren't even trying anymore. I remember sitting in a state senator's office, and I was watching their legislative aide listen to the voicemails that they got. And I said, how many voicemails or calls does a senator need to get on a specific issue for the senator to take notice of that issue? And he said 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
5 or 6 calls out of a state of 6 million people, 5 or 6 calls, and that senator will start to pay attention to that issue. You can make a difference. Don't think that you can't. It is possible for you to do this. It's just a matter of breaking through that internal barrier that we can't make a difference, and taking action. It's the biggest barrier to grassroots success is what I'm sitting on right here, is the couch. That's the biggest barrier, because apathy is a dangerous thing. People just like sitting. But you can get people off the couch. You can motivate them. And a lot of the skills that we teach in GLA can help you do that.
Very good. So I have we have the link there, but it's grassrootsleadershipacademy.org. We also have the link to GLA on Facebook, so they can definitely reach you there. Duane, thank you again for joining us. If you can stick around for a minute, I'm going to talk to you during the outro. But thank you again for joining. It was great. I hope to be able to have you on again in the future.
Anytime. I love this stuff.
Cool. So, guys, thank you again for joining us. And my fellow Americans, thank you for joining me and Duane. Be sure to check out Grassroots Leadership Academy. Also, check out the Libertarian Dad Bod Calendar. It is the Christmas gift that you didn't know you wanted to give every member of your extended family. That link is in there. So tune in. I don't know if I believe you can tune in tomorrow night, and Matt has a guest on the writer's block. I'm not 100% certain of that, though, so don't get mad if I'm incorrect. Join us next Tuesday for the Muddy Waters of Freedom. Matt should be feeling well by then, and so we'll be doing an episode, our normal episode, unlike yesterday's episode, where it was pretty much just a request line, and I played music videos, although that was very popular, so we may do that again. So tune in to Muddy Waters of Freedom on Tuesday, and we will be talking about the news that has happened over the last week. Next Wednesday, my fellow Americans, I will be having the Philosopher. She's very popular on social media for her libertarian memes. The Philosopher will be on next Wednesday. But again, thank you for joining us. Check us out tomorrow, Tuesday, and next week. And happy beginning of your Hanukkah if you celebrate that. But thank you for tuning in again. We will see you very soon, and God bless you.